Okay, so video number two of this of the Women in Cannabis series that I want to do. I'm honored and excited to have someone that is a female leader in cannabis at one of the most talked about, biggest companies in the industry, but also someone who was named as one of the most influential people in cannabis. Dina Rollman. I'm so excited to have you here today.
Thanks so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah, no, like I said, I appreciate it a lot. I know how busy you are and everything you have going on. You and I met through Teddy Scott last week, and I've been telling so many people about that first conversation I had with you. I didn't know what to expect, but I think we talked for like an hour and a half, and it was like, you literally opened my eyes and my head to this industry. So thank you for that. But just so everybody else can get an idea of who you are, do you want to give a background of you and your experience so far?
Sure, happy to. So from Chicago, graduated law school a long time ago and practiced commercial litigation for years. I'm not going to say how many, and was doing legal work that had nothing at all to do with cannabis. And then in early 2014, Illinois had legalized medical cannabis. And I can't really explain it, but I just kind of just knew on some like gut level, like this was my opportunity to combine being a lawyer and like the skills I had developed doing that with my passion for cannabis. And, when I say passion for cannabis, it doesn't just mean like being a stoner. It means like, there's a lot more to it than that. Like as we've all seen, right? It's a plant, it's a cause, it's wellness and well-being, it's health, it's medicine. So it kind of sparked a passion in me, no pun intended, like really quickly. And so I started teaching myself about the Illinois law, just so I could understand like what was coming. And I was so excited because our legislature had just mapped out an entirely new industry. It's like a legal cannabis industry didn't exist. And then they had decided on paper how many growers there would be, how many dispensaries, how you would package the product, how you would dispose of cannabis waste. I mean, I felt like there was like no detail they hadn't thought of. So I could see it, like I could just see the industry that was coming ahead. And I knew I wanted to be a part of it. So I was giving these continuing education presentations at my law firm during lunchtime, just again, to like sort of teach myself and get some continuing ed credits. And my partners at I'd made partner at the law firm, and my partners would attend my lunchtime sessions and just thought I was sort of funny and weird. And what was I smoking? Because why am I giving lunchtime presentations about weed and weed?
What year was this? What year was this?
2014.
Okay.
So I don't mind being made fun of. It's fine. And luckily one of my partners who attended said, wait a minute, you should really talk to my brother and his friend, Ben Kovler, because they're putting together a group that's applying for licenses in Illinois. So through that, I met Ben, and long story short, helped Ben and his team with sort of the written portion of these competitive license applications. And for anybody who's listening to this, you might be picturing an application as like a 2-page form that you fill out, but like not at all. It's a state RFP process, but our submission filled up a U-Haul truck. Like it was that many boxes of documents. It took months. Like I got permission to get off of the litigation cases I was on to work full time on these applications. And I spent the summer of 2014, pulling all-nighters, working nights, weekends, and there was a group of us. I mean, it's a massive effort. It was like very hard fought. So, you hand that application in, and then, you kind of go back to your normal life. I picked back my cases back to being kind of a boring lawyer. No offense to all the lawyers out there, but, after you've kind of been in cannabis world for months and a startup and all that, it was so exciting. And then it was kind of like, went from Technicolor to black and white, back to law. And then about 6 months after we handed in the application, we got the news kind of out of the blue that we'd won a bunch of licenses.
When you say we, you mean?
Green Thumb Industries. Okay. So that was like early days of Green Thumb Industries when we all still had our day jobs. Ben Kovler still had his day job. I had mine. Nobody had quit a job. This writing the application was just something we did sort of, nights, weekends, et cetera. So Green Thumb won, cultivation licenses, a dispensary license, and I could just see like this was going to kick off a massive amount of legal work. And I wanted to do it. So I quit my job at my law firm, colleagues, friends in the industry, my partners at my law firm, we're all like, what are you smoking? Yeah. Like, how do you quit like the security of a job as a partner at a law firm to chase cannabis law, which is still federally illegal. I mean, I really had friends asking me if I'd, a criminal defense lawyer on speed dial, in case I got put in jail, and what would happen if I got disbarred and lost my ability to practice law. I mean, I had plenty of people pointing out every risk to me. And I just tuned them out. And I don't know, I knew it was a gamble, but I felt good about it.
And just so I could make sure like I'm following you exactly. So what year was it that you quit your job?
So it was February 2015.
Of 2015.
Yeah.
Okay. And at that point, out of the people that you knew that was in cannabis, that were in the business of cannabis, I should say, how many of them are women?
None. Literally none. I mean, I guess there were, it was in February 2015 that the state of Illinois announced who had won the licenses. And, it's a huge topic now. Basically 95% of the licenses went to companies owned by white men. So I think there was a dispensary group that was women owned. No cultivators were women owned. So one has a female founder. So, I mean, a negligible amount out of all the licenses. And, in the early days when we would have like industry association meetings, not uncommon to be the only woman in the room.
So how did you deal with that? The reason why I'm asking is because it's not like you don't have like case studies of like, you're hearing about being a woman in cannabis and things like that. You don't even have much about the industry per se, right? And but obviously you're a partner at a law firm, so which is also very white male dominated.
Yes.
And dominated. So I wouldn't think like, I know you're used to some of this stuff, but
yes,
talk about how you felt like during this.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, you hit the nail on the head. Coming from the law firm world, this was not new to me. So I worked at a litigation boutique, a 20 lawyer firm. I was one of 2 female partners. Like when I would go to court, to argue something, my opposing counsel, 99% of the time was, a white male. And I had instances where they would ask me if I was the court reporter, other, things like that. So I, spent enough years kind of in the trenches to have dealt with all kinds of problems, if you want to call them, in the legal industry about, sort of the lack of women in like, sort of leadership positions and in the partner ranks and all that. So that none of that was new to me or shocking. But coming from where I came from and seeing what I saw in those early days, I know we'll probably talk about it more in this discussion, but it was in August of 2014 that I founded a not-for-profit called Illinois Women in Cannabis. Because
what year? I'm sorry, what year was it?
That was August of 2014.
Okay.
Before they issued the licenses, my thought was, okay, I know what it looks like to operate in a male-dominated industry, and I know how hard it is to catch up, right? It's not easy for people of color or women to catch up in an industry. And here we have this unbelievable opportunity in Illinois where like the industry does not exist as of right now. Like not a single person is legally growing or selling marijuana in the entire state of Illinois, but soon they will. So it's like this moment in time where everyone's on the same playing field and nobody's ahead. So I founded this not-for-profit with the thought of women, like, do not sleep on this opportunity. I just wanted to raise awareness and not just for applying for licenses, because it was basically already too late for women to just last minute decide to apply for licenses. I wasn't as focused on that at that time. It was, if you're the accountant at your law firm, learn cannabis accounting. It's got, a million wrinkles, and you could be kind of the rainmaker at your accounting firm who understands cannabis law and gets cannabis clients. I did it as a lawyer. I'm like, back in 2014, I mean, you could count on 2 hands how many lawyers in the state understood, what existed in terms of cannabis law.
Yeah.
I just wanted to raise women's awareness kind of in every professional field, so their minds would start churning about the opportunities. So that was kind of how I approached it. Was like, I was fine. I knew how to navigate it all, but I didn't want to be alone for too long. I'm like, come on, women, like, join me. There's a ton of opportunity here.
So, okay. So you decided to start the Illinois Women in Cannabis. So talk a little bit about that. Like, who's part of it? How has it grown? Like, what are you doing with that right now?
I mean, it's one of the things I'm really honestly most proud of, because it was just a sort of idea I had, 7 years ago. And I reached out to Wendy Berger. She is on the board of Green Thumb Industries and really basically always has been. I think she was the first woman to be on the board of a cannabis company, and she's recently was the only woman to be on the board of a publicly traded cannabis company. So she's like deep into the industry and has been around since day one. So I reached out to her and said, what do you think about this idea, of really trying to promote awareness and opportunities for women? And she said, I'm in. So she was my co-founder, and we put on our first networking event in September of 2014. And we called every friend we had and begged them to come to our event. Nobody knew what we meant by a cannabis networking event. There were a lot of misperceptions that this was just like, party we were throwing, big smoke session, and nobody was really picturing the professional event that it was. So we had, 50 people at that first event, which felt like a huge victory at the time to even get 50 people in the room talking about cannabis. But we knew we were onto something. The excitement level, I'll never forget that night. It was like electric in there because it was just a bunch of other people in the early days who were very excited about this opportunity, and who had these were the entrepreneurs, people who had ideas and visions. So it was like an amazing room. That was all just word of mouth and Facebook. That was it. And we just built from there. So recruited some board members. Green Thumb was supported from day one, sponsoring events. Cresco, a law school friend of mine, Vanessa Bechtel is the sister of Charlie Bechtel, who's the founder CEO of Cresco. She and I are old law school friends. So she joined the board of Illinois Women in Cannabis, and sort of got Cresco to be an early supporter. And we just kind of went through our networks. And so we built the crowds. We built, then it was 100 people in an event, and 150 and 200. Our last event right before COVID had 700 people at it. It was wild.
Oh, wow.
700 people. Yeah.
Where was it at? Where did you have it?
It was at a cool venue in the West Loop. And really, we just keep outgrowing venues. But, the thing that's really kind of made it unique for Illinois, and the reason we have real staying power as a, not-for-profit networking group is, I would say a couple things. One is from day one, totally inclusive. Even though we're called Illinois Women in Cannabis, we wanted everybody in the room, people with access, connections, power, resources, advice, anything and everything. And then everybody who was looking for those things. So that's men and women. It's people who identify as male or female, sort of anywhere on the, gender spectrum, race, color, religion, you name it. We created an atmosphere that I think every single person who walked in the door at our events, felt really comfortable on. And it normalized the idea of just being in a huge room full of people talking about cannabis. And it was treated as something like a professional endeavor. And what people started doing is bringing their work colleagues to our events, and saying, trust me, you can come to this Women in Cannabis networking event. And I know it sounds crazy, but there's really good business opportunities at these networking events. And so it built and built. And so we got a lot of great corporate sponsors at our events that supported us. And then we also built our credibility in a way that I think was really important with state regulators. So the head of the Illinois cannabis program would come speak at our event. The main legislators who sponsored the adult use bill, they speak at our events. We've had this kind of cooperative relationship where we're just seen as a credible place to see and be seen, by kind of anybody and everybody who's either wants to be in the industry or is already in. So we brought on our first executive director this past year. Her name is Amor Montes de Oca. And she is doing an incredible job of growing our membership base, building out the number of virtual networking events we did during COVID, and really just helping us strategize for the future. So exciting times at IWC and a lot of exciting things in store.
So what you did with starting that organization, and then I'd love for you to talk about what you're doing at GTI with the LEAP program. But before you describe that, I'm actually curious. I want to know, why is the social equity part so important for you? And I'm asking this knowing the answer because we talked last time about it, but I think it's great that you're at a level that you're at, and instead of just focusing on the dollars and the just on the money part or just on the legal part, you're genuinely making a shit ton of effort to literally do this social equity thing right. And I want to know why is that so important to you, Dina? And then what you're doing with that at GTI.
Well, thank you. It's important to me because it's important. So we have a really unique industry, right? Like any other industry you look at, it does not have its roots in criminalization of people of color. Ours does. It's a disgusting, shameful history, starting with Harry Anslinger back in the 1920s or 30s, was the one who came up with this idea to criminalize cannabis, and it was just racist. He just used marijuana criminalization as a way to target, Mexicans and other people of color. And then, really Nixon really took it to the next level, and used it as kind of to create a bit of a targeted race campaign, for criminalizing and imprisoning people of color, mainly Black people. So we are still sitting here in 2021 with people, mostly people of color, sitting in prison for growing or selling weed. And then at the very same time, you have this crazy situation of, I work for a publicly traded company that's, covered by Wall Street analysts, right? And so it's like no other industry has this, inherent, kind of conflict and contradiction, but it's not like a theoretical problem. It's like unconscionable, right? It's unjust. And so I love that I'm helping to normalize cannabis as a profession, as wellness, everything about the industry I am passionate about. But I wouldn't feel right just kind of having my own tunnel vision about it without personally and through my company trying to right the wrongs of the harm, the war on drugs. We're heavily financially supporting an organization called Last Prisoner Project, which works to free people who are in prison for nonviolent cannabis crimes. We're working on doing expungement and sealing of criminal records related to cannabis, because we know if you have that on your record, it works against you, in so many ways, including, most basically just employment opportunities. So it's kind of there's people in prison, which is a problem. And then there's the people that weren't in prison that has caused all kinds of harms to people in their communities. So we need to legalize for lots of reasons. I mean, that's why I've always been passionate about it. It's not just one reason, it's many, but a huge one is the social justice element. We have to stop, putting people in jail for it, because all it is another tool of systemic racism.
So as of right now, if you've been convicted of, I don't know, having, an ounce of weed, or if you have any kind of marijuana crimes on your record, does that disqualify you from owning a dispensary, getting a license?
Not anymore, not in Illinois.
Okay.
So the tide has really shifted, I would say, even in my years in the industry, where, initially any criminal record of any kind was going to be a problem, other than maybe a DUI or something, I think, was a hurdle you could get over. But anything more serious than that was, could prevent you from owning a license. Now you're really seeing a shift where there's this recognition of, hey, wait a minute, the people that have cannabis convictions on their records we're doing the exact same thing that we're just legally doing now. And the point is, it should never have been illegal. So we can't, we can't continue to penalize them. So now there's actually preference given to people who have been harmed by the war on drugs, including having nonviolent cannabis convictions, except in some states. I believe Pennsylvania will not even let us employ somebody who has a past cannabis conviction on their record.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So there's needs for advocacy in areas like that as well, where there's just some really bad laws on the books that are it just perpetuates the war on drugs. It's people serve their time and then they pay the price again and again and again. So, we need the court system to catch up and do expungements. We need the legislatures to fix some of these laws that are on the books. And then we have to, the social equity piece is creating opportunities. So you do have this industry right now that's very much, white male dominated in terms of ownership of license, and massive opportunity out there. It's not like all the demand has been tapped already and we don't need any more cannabis companies. We absolutely, there's tons of opportunity ahead, either on the cultivation side or, the dispensary side, and then every ancillary service that surrounds all of that. There's a massive amount of opportunity still. So we're just trying to, through Green Thumb and, my colleagues in the industry.
Hey, Dina, you froze for a second.
Oh, shoot. Am I back?
Okay, we had technical issues. Sorry about that. But I want to make sure that you express everything that you wanted to. So as it relates to the social equity part, Dina, you started a program within GTI, the LEAP program, right? Can you talk a little bit about that and what it is right now and why, what the goal for that is?
Sure. So, at the beginning of our conversation, I was talking about how, my entry into the cannabis industry was helping Green Thumb write its competitive license application, and how daunting it was. And it took, months of work and tons of money, and we hired experts and consultants and all that. So, and that was a process that I had repeated, for multiple states. Maryland application, we won a license, Pennsylvania, Ohio, New Jersey, et cetera. So it wound up being an area where I developed some amount of like experience and expertise on something that like, who the heck, how many people in the country know how to write a competitive license application? So when Illinois legalized adult use back in 2019 and said, for social equity applicants, there's going to be a competitive license application, it just became clear to me, like, one really significant, meaningful way we could help would be to just help them with these applications. I mean, these applications are no joke, very hard.
Yeah.
Complicated. So came up with the idea, LEAP is License Education Assistance Program. So the thought was effectively create a pro bono program for any and all social equity applicants to help them get from, starting the application process to getting to the finish line. So that's like phase one of the LEAP program. So what we did for, I think until COVID, so like a good 6-month period was in person every single week at my office at GTI. And then when we outgrew all of our conference room space, we went to Chicago Kent Law School and used their classrooms. But every week, I blocked out on my calendar, 3 hours. So the first hour was a general educational session for every social equity applicant of like, let me walk you through, how do you approach writing a business plan? How do you approach writing a security plan? Kind of each part of the application, like, let me kind of give you the overview and tips and whatever. And then we would break into one-on-one counseling sessions that they could sign up for in advance. And that's where applicants could say, okay, like, here's the section of the application I'm struggling with. What do I do with this? So did that every week. And then, in the evenings, because, not everybody could attend during the day, people have work. So then we would do educational sessions in the evenings. Chicago State hosted us a couple times and other places like that. We put together like application guides to kind of, again, like kind of very logically walk through, like, how do you approach this whole application thing? We got people to volunteer as pro bono attorneys. We got a security company to provide help, pro bono help with security plans and things like that. I mean, we just try to like bolster and gather as much resource as possible. So we helped, well over 100 applicants with their applications. Along the way, developed like really nice personal relationships, emotionally invested in, quite a few of these applicants. So it's been like a heartbreaker would be an understatement that it's now almost a year has gone by and they are still waiting for these licenses to get issued. So huge disappointment and frustration for all of us. But once Illinois gets its act together and finally issues these licenses, then we will launch what we call, like phase 2 of the LEAP program, which will be much more of like an incubator business accelerator for a handful of the winners. We just opened our 55th dispensary. Like, we know how to like win a license and then operationalize it like clockwork, basically at this point. We can do it, very efficiently. We've learned a ton of lessons, whereas you can pretty much bet that this social equity dispensary license winner will likely have never opened a dispensary in his or her life. So again, the thought is like, not everyone has to learn everything the hard way. Let's use all this like, institutional knowledge and bandwidth we have and help them succeed. So we'll pick a few groups to incubate, and we will get them from license award to getting that dispensary open, operational, and successful.
Got it. I think that's phenomenal. I think it's all the things that you're involved in outside of what directly affects your role at GTI. Like
none of it is in my job description.
That's what I mean. And I think that's why I wanted this to be more about that, because the amount of work you're doing is like unreal. And I respect that a lot. And, one of the things that I always ask, especially women that are business leaders or founders and CEOs are at the end of this stuff is like, what advice do you have for other women, right? As it pertains to either being an entrepreneur or being a business leader, but for you specifically, like, what advice do you have for other women who want to get into cannabis or who are in cannabis right now? And, they feel the loneliness more, or they feel the segregation or the separation a lot more. Like, what advice do you have?
For one, it is join something like Illinois Women in Cannabis, because for me, it's just been obviously incredible that I get to meet all the great women in the Illinois industry, one way or the other. I get to meet them all. And so I don't feel alone. I certainly don't feel alone at my company. We have great women in leadership, but just, beyond that, it's a real community in Illinois. So that's a kind of the fastest way to kind of hook in and meet other women who are either in it or fighting to get in it. And the other thing is, it's not a traditional industry by any stretch. I mean, that's one of my favorite things about it is like the characters I meet are just unique, one after the other. Yeah. And I love that because I feel free to be myself and do things sort of my way. And I don't have to fit a script. I mean, I make up my job at Green Thumb. I'm doing government relations for a federally illegal company. Like, there is no script for that. The conversations I have are not your typical government relations, conversations. So, I try to tell women, like, don't think you have to come in and kind of like act like the guys, like there's no way to be in this industry. There's no type. You get to come as you are with your life experiences and your strengths and your passions and all of that, and make it work. I think one of the biggest ingredients for success, though, in this industry is passion. I mean, you don't have to be passionate about cannabis, and as the industry grows and scales, tons of people are getting into it that just see it as a good career opportunity or business opportunity. But those of us who just feel passionate about it, we find each other and we help each other. We want to keep the passion alive in this industry.
Yeah, and my perception as it relates to like the future of what can benefit everyone, especially people that are minorities, and especially women of color, right? I think there's the two things that I'm always keep my eye on. Well, before cannabis, it was tech. Like, I feel like tech and the concept of being able to raise money and to being able to build a product or a service that can really make an impact. I think that, you see a lot more younger entrepreneurs and things like that there. Now, I feel like since I met you and Teddy, I feel like I got a bachelor's degree in cannabis, and I feel like the opportunity in cannabis is probably like the biggest one. And then I'm sure there's going to be things where you're going to combine tech and cannabis, and it's so exciting knowing what could happen. Yes, so I really, really appreciate you doing this, especially with your schedule and with all that.
My pleasure. I'm so glad that Teddy introduced us. I like to sort of, the minute we started talking, I felt like we could talk for 10 hours. So I feel like this is just round 2 of our conversation, and more to come.
Absolutely. So thank you so much. And then I will tag you on this video so that if anybody wants to, learn more about you, or if I know your schedule is busy. So I think everyone that wants to connect with you should know that. But at the same time, they could, if anything, follow you on social media, on LinkedIn, so that they can stay updated on everything that you're doing.
Sounds great.
Cool. Well, thank you so much. Okay.
Thanks. Okay. Talk to you later. Bye.